Hey folks, this is a video dealing with conjugate zeros. So let's start right in on the conjugate zeros theorem. Conjugate zeros theorem says if a plus bi, the complex number, is a zero, remember that's the same thing as a solution of the polynomial, then we know that the conjugate must also be a solution or a zero. Notice that I've got this little yellow tab up here talking about multiplying two complex conjugate zeros together. I have formulated this equation here. You are not required to memorize this equation. However, if you do, it will make your life a whole lot easier. And I'll teach you how to use that. I do refer to this equation as the little dude equation. All right, so let's look at an example. This says that if negative 3 and 6 plus 2i are zeros of a cubic, find the missing zeros. Now I'm going to stop right there. Look at the tips over on the side. First thing, it says to make a list of our zeros. So I automatically know that x equals negative 3 is going to be a 0. Look at our tip over here, number 2. It says to turn your zeros into factors. And so you remember, if x equals negative 3, if that's a 0, then my factor that corresponds with that is x plus 3. You can think of this as taking your negative 3 over to the other side to be with the x. So that's our first 0. In the directions it says 6 plus 2i is also a 0. So we know that x equals 6 plus 2i is a 0. If we turn that into a factor, take both pieces over to the left side to be with the x, so that you'll have x minus 6 minus 2i. And then lastly, there's no more in the directions, but our conjugate zeros theorem says that if a plus bi is a 0, then a minus bi also has to be a 0. So then I know that x is equal to 6 minus 2i has to be a 0 here. If you turn that into a factor, take everything over to the left to be with the x, that'll be x minus 6 plus 2i. Now, tip number 3 says to take your factors and multiply them together. So here's a list of our three factors. Let's multiply those together. So the first one is our x plus 3. The second one is our x minus 6 minus 2i. And the third one is x minus 6 plus 2i. Now, remember that I gave you little dude, and this is so that I can multiply these two complex conjugate zeros together. And this is my shortcut, so this is what I'm going to be using to be able to multiply those together. So for now, I'm going to totally leave alone that x plus 3. I'm not going to deal with that quite yet. And so our little dude says that the first thing we're going to have is our x squared. Then it says minus 2 times ax. Now come over here to the left side of the screen, and you'll notice that I made a list here of what the a is and what the b is, thinking about a plus bi. My a is a 6, and my b, you could say it's a 2 or a negative 2, either one, it doesn't matter. And so when I'm over here using little dude, and it says that I need 2 times a times x, that's the a that I'm going to use. So my a then is a 6. So that's going to be minus 2 times 6 times x. I'll clean that up in a minute. And then I have plus a squared, so that's going to be 6 squared. And then I need to add to that plus my b squared, so that's going to be adding my 2 squared. This is why it doesn't matter if it's a plus or a minus, because either way, if you square it, you get a positive. All right, so let's go ahead then and clean that up. Again, I'm leaving my first factor alone and just starting to clean up my second group. Continuing to clean up. So now I have a binomial times a trinomial. Take a look over here again at the left side of the screen. This is taking a trinomial times a binomial, and I'm treating it like I would in 3rd grade, a 3-digit number times a 2-digit number. So if I had to multiply a positive 40 and a positive 3, this is where I would get positive 120. And then a 3 times a negative 12x, this is where I get my negative 36x. A 3 times an x squared gives me my 3x squared. Then I'm going to move to my x's. So an x times a 40 is a 40x. And an x times negative 12x is negative 12x squared. X times x squared, x cubed. So you can see here where I got these. And then I'm going to take these two lines. I've lined everything up by like terms, and I'm going to add them together. So I have my x cubed. These two, when you add them together, gives you your negative 9x squared. Add these together, you get your positive 4x, and then your positive 120. So my very last line then is going to be that x cubed minus 9x squared plus 4x plus 20. And that is the part of the directions that says that I'm supposed to find the standard equation of p of x. Standard equation is where everything is multiplied out. So this guy right here would be my standard equation of p of x.